The Scariest Government Secrets, Finally Revealed, Part 1. Throughout history, nations have built their power not only on armies, resources, and innovation, but on secrecy. Behind closed doors, governments have concealed truths that, if revealed, could shake public confidence, destabilize order, or spark outrage that no administration could contain. Secrets are the currency of power, and when those secrets are finally dragged into the light, they often feel less like sober facts and more like fragments from a dystopian novel. Yet the truth is that many of the most frightening revelations of government conduct are not fiction at all, but documented events that ordinary citizens were never meant to know. Consider the chilling realization that for decades, people were experimented on without their knowledge or consent. Medical ethics, as we understand them today, were not always part of official doctrine. In the mid-20th century, agencies sanctioned experiments in which radioactive materials were secretly administered to patients under the guise of routine care. The justification, cloaked in the language of national security, was that testing the effects of radiation on the human body might prepare the nation for a potential nuclear confrontation. But in reality, the victims were unsuspecting men, women, and even children whose suffering was rationalized as data collection. This is not a story from the pages of a horror novel. It is a historical fact, revealed only after decades of secrecy, when investigative journalists and declassified files pulled back the curtain. Equally disturbing is the knowledge that governments have not only hidden what they were doing, but deliberately shaped what their citizens thought was real. Propaganda is as old as civilization, but the scale of information control in the modern era reaches far beyond posters and pamphlets. Psychological operations, conducted both domestically and abroad, have blurred the line between fact and fabrication. Citizens have been persuaded to believe events unfolded one way, when in fact, the government orchestrated them to appear so. Covert programs existed for the sole purpose of studying how to manipulate mass opinion, often without the public realizing they were part of the experiment. One cannot help but question how many of our present-day beliefs are the result of free thought, and how many are carefully engineered illusions. But perhaps the most disturbing government secrets are not those that manipulate ideas, but those that manipulate people. Intelligence agencies during the Cold War funded research into mind control techniques, exploring whether human behavior could be bent, reshaped, or erased altogether. To accomplish this, they dosed unsuspecting citizens with psychoactive substances, monitored reactions, and destroyed lives in pursuit of an impossible goal: absolute control over the human mind. Victims were often left with permanent psychological scars. Yet, the officials behind these experiments justified their work by invoking the specter of enemy nations conducting similar research. Fear of being left behind in the technological arms race allowed nearly anything to be excused. When fragments of these programs became public decades later, the public response was outrage, but the damage had already been done. Records had been destroyed, and many of those affected never received justice. The reach of secrecy extended far beyond laboratories. Governments have hidden accidents, disasters, and near catastrophes from the very citizens whose lives were at stake. During the nuclear age, there were incidents where weapons were lost, reactors malfunctioned, and radioactive materials were accidentally dispersed across populated regions. In some cases, communities were reassured that nothing was amiss, even as contamination silently spread through soil and water. It was only years later, when patterns of illness became undeniable, that the truth began to emerge. What does it mean when the very authority entrusted to protect you decides that silence is preferable to transparency? The cost of secrecy is not merely trust, it is human life. Even darker are the revelations that certain governments have engaged in clandestine operations designed to destabilize foreign nations, sometimes allies, sometimes adversaries, but always in pursuit of political advantage. Covert coups, assassinations, and funding of paramilitary groups have shaped the course of global history in ways that citizens never suspected at the time. Leaders have fallen, movements have collapsed, and wars have been fought, not solely because of open diplomacy or battlefield victories, but because of decisions made in secret rooms rooms, shielded from the scrutiny of the public. When these operations eventually come to light, they reveal not only the ruthless logic of power, but the disturbing willingness of governments to treat entire nations as pawns on a chessboard. But government secrecy is not always confined to foreign operations. Within their own borders, administrations have kept watch on their citizen to a degree few could have imagined. Surveillance programs once dismissed as the stuff of conspiracy theories were eventually confirmed by leaked documents and whistleblowers. Phone calls, emails, online searches, all quietly intercepted, stored, and analyzed in the name of national security. Official statements insisted these measures targeted only external threats, but the reality showed a far broader scope. Citizens who believed themselves private individuals were, in fact, subjects of mass monitoring, and when the public finally learned of these programs, the most disturbing realization was not just that surveillance existed, but that it had been normalized. The infrastructure of observation was already in place, permanent, and largely beyond the reach of democratic oversight. Among the most unsettling aspects of government secrecy is how often it intersects with science and technology. Projects classified as defense research have explored weapons that defy ordinary imagination, devices intended to manipulate weather, incapacitate populations without leaving visible harm, or interfere with the very functioning of the human nervous system. Whether every project reached operational reality is not always clear. What is undeniable is that enormous resources were devoted to exploring them, and fragments of declassified files show concepts that could easily be mistaken for speculative fiction. Yet they are not fiction. They are testaments to the fact that governments, when granted secrecy, will pursue knowledge without limit, regardless of moral cost. As frightening as these revelations are, perhaps the greatest fear comes not from what we know, but from what remains hidden. For every secret that has emerged through documents, whistleblowers, or investigations, there are countless others still locked away. Files remain classified not because they are irrelevant, but because revealing them would still have consequences today. Governments operate on the principle that information is power, and thus withholding it is a way of maintaining control. The disturbing thought is that the most terrifying secrets may not yet be the ones we know, but the ones we do not. When these secrets eventually do surface, often decades after the events themselves, they force us to confront uncomfortable truths. They remind us that trust in authority must always be tempered by vigilance, that national security can become a justification for abuse, and that even in democratic societies, secrecy can erode accountability. The scariest government secrets are not simply shocking anecdotes from the past. They are warnings about the future, about what can happen when the pursuit of power overrides the principles of transparency and human dignity. And yet there is a strange paradox. The very act of revealing these secrets does not necessarily dismantle the systems that created them. Citizens may express outrage, committees may hold hearings, reports may be published, but the machinery of secrecy continues to operate. It adapts, learns, and conceals itself anew. Thus, the cycle repeats. Revelation sparks scandal, scandal fades, and secrecy resumes. The true horror lies not only in the secrets themselves, but in the realization that this process is endless.